Hero. Any person admired for courage, nobility, or exploits, especially in war. Any person admired for qualities or achievements and regarded as an ideal or model. They rise to the occasion. They meet the challenge. They inspire us. They are heroes. Donald K. Ross, born December 8, 1910 in Beverly, Kansas. On December 7, 1941, Donald Ross was on board the U.S.S. Nevada. As a machinist's mate, Mr. Ross received the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroic actions taken during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Mr. Ross retired from the U.S. Navy after serving for 27 years and working his way up to the rank of captain. He now lives in the state of Washington with his wife, Helen. Pearl Harbor is remembered by those words spoken by Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
That day still lives in Donald Ross's memory.
I was shaving in my stateroom, and I'd had the right-hand side of my short haircut removed, and I was working on the other side when I heard a big boom that alerted me, and this must have been about 5 or 6 minutes before 8 o'clock. And I said, oh, hell, the Army's practicing again, because we'd been on a war alert until midnight when the war alert is supposed to end it. And within another 7 or 8 seconds, I heard a bigger boom, and so I was facing my lavatory about like this, and I just had to turn and stick my head out of the porthole and take a look across the landing field on Ford Island and look down there, and here was a great big black cloud going up where they had hit one of these doggone gas tanks. And but boy, it didn't take me but about 2 or 3 seconds when these guys were down there and they were shooting tracers. And I said, oh my God. And then just about that time, these 3 of them were flying in a formation like that. And they come out and they were reaching the far end, and they probably weren't over 10 feet off of the deck of the landing strip. And they come right up over the Nevada. I saw those 6 setting suns looking me right in the face, and I didn't need any more information. I knew where we were at and what we were doing.
It was the beginning of World War II for the United States. In this film, entitled December 7th, which received an Academy Award in 1943, the attack was reconstructed to document the events of that day of infamy.
Turned with my other hand and grabbed the telephone that was on my desk, got the operator, and I said, give me the chief's quarters, and thank God I got my chief boilermaker, Fitzpatrick. And the minute he answered, I said, this is the engineer speaking. I said, get all of those chiefs out of the quarters and tell them to get ready. We're under armed force attack. Get to the boiler rooms and the engine rooms and let's go, because we're going to sea. I slammed that thing down. He said, and I said, execute, just like that right in his ear. I guess I blowed him away from that telephone quick, because by the time I got down below, my chiefs were already there. I felt doggone it, I got a job to do. I had to get there and get down in engineering control and get ready to answer bells, because we were going to get underway. That was our mission. That's why I was there. I didn't have to stop and think about it. Hell, I was a professional. I'd been in that Navy for 12 years. I'd been trained on battle training for an awful long and a lot of different ships. I didn't think about fear. I didn't have time to. I had a commander's job to carry out. And here I was just a doggone pinstripe monkey wrench. But I wasn't a junior engineer. I knew more than those ensigns and JDs did about handling that plant. All of a sudden, I'd been standing there about maybe a half a second or 2 seconds when I heard choo, 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 choo. So I knew where my first class machinist mate was. he was rolling the main circulating pump, and I heard another pump start down here, and that was his fireman starting the lube oil pump. And just at that time, the sound power phone from the bridge deck called, and I reached over and picked it up. That was, you talked by battery power, you didn't need electricity. And I was the engineer of the watch speaking, and it was the chief quartermaster, Bob Sedbury. And he says, he knew my voice, and he said, Mr. Ross, how long will it take you to be underway? I said, I'll be ready to answer bells in 30 minutes. He said, you can't do that. It takes us 3.5 hours to get underway. I said, Sedbury, I said I would be ready to answer bells in 30 minutes. And I said, I've got hot boilers. Oh, aye, sir. And just as I got forward to whether I was go through the distribution room to go down the hatch, to go down an 18-foot ladder into the dynamo room where we made the power that was all being made for the whole ship. I got down about 12 feet, and we got a torpedo hit on the port side of the ship that knocked me right off of that ladder, and I hit on my you-know-what, right in the flat of my behind. And here my gang was all there. And they said, Mr. Ross, you'll break the deck. And they were laughing at me because they'd knocked me off. And I knew what had happened, because a hit like that from a torpedo, it really gives a ship, even a big ship like that, it gives it a jolt that'll jolt it at least 18, maybe 20 inches. And this is what I walked into when I got there. Now I wanted to hear what was going on, and I called the switchboard, and I told them, I says, tie me in with the bridge control from main engine control. The Arizona had been hit from a aerial bomb of one of their middle level, pretty heavy duty bomb, and it had gone through between the armored hatch, between number 1 and 2 turrets on the Arizona. And it went on down, clear down into the powder and shell room. And when that bomb got down there, it blew, and when it blew all of the all of the powder and ammunition from number 1 and 2 turrets. And what that did, that just opened that Arizona up like you'd open up a blooming rose. The other hits that came along with ours, the West Virginia was just forward of the vessel alongside of the Tennessee, 2 of our big babies, big battleships, and the West Virginia herself must have had 5 torpedo hits. So the old West Virginia just settled down right onto the bottom. The next group that were hit at the same instant was our Oklahoma, my sister ship to my Nevada. At that time, it was probably about maybe 9.5. And when she got hit, she immediately started to turn. And she turned over within 7 minutes and was clear upside down. And she lost about 300 people. And I was listening, but I was the only one that was hooked up to these sound power phones. I was the only one that had the phones on. And I wasn't telling them what was going on. I didn't want to get those kids scared. I had one kid down there with me that was, we found out later he was only 15 and a half years old.
Heroes will be back in a moment. We now return to Heroes.
December 7th, 1941, a day of infamy. Even as Japanese diplomats were conferring with Secretary of State Hull on peace measures, Nipponese planes were swooping down on Pearl Harbor. This pictorial record includes both U.S. films and pictures made by the enemy as they dropped their load of death on the naval base, on Wheeler Field, on civilian homes and schools. 100 Japanese planes and a number of midget submarines took part in the attack. In an hour hour and 5 minutes, the battleship Arizona was completely destroyed and 4 others severely damaged. 3 other battleships and 3 cruisers suffered lesser damage. Nearly 200 planes were destroyed. In that Sunday morning inferno, the Pacific Fleet appeared to be completely immobilized by the sneak attack. Nearly 3,000 casualties added to the catastrophe. Within hours, the United States declared war. The attack on Pearl Harbor united Americans as never before in history. In the explosions at Pearl Harbor, there was forged the will for complete and absolute victory over the forces of evil. In Hawaii, civilian and soldier alike turned to the task of caring for the wounded and homeless. At the time, an actual landing by the Japanese was expected, and makeshift plans were made to fight the invader on the beaches and in the streets. The Japanese lost 5 midget subs as well as 29 planes and 100 men. Small cost for the damage they were able to inflict on the U.S. fleet.
The toll was high. Survivors who go back to Pearl Harbor go back to the memorial anchored above the remains of the U.S.S. Arizona to remember the 2,043 Americans who died at Pearl Harbor. The battle machinist's mate Donald Ross waged that day was on board the U.S.S. Nevada, below deck, keeping her power going. 1 hour after the attack began, Japanese bombs hit the Nevada.
And when that hit, it blew this fire from the next explosion, which was right above me, 2 decks, and blew that fire and flame and smoke through the ventilation system. And here I'm sitting right there under a vent blower, and it hit me just like that. Well, that blinded this eye very badly, and this one I was smoked up. And I knew we were filling with smoke, and we were going to all die. So I told my 27 men that I had with me, I said, get out of here. And I didn't use very polite language because I want them to execute, but I didn't want to get fouled up and die down there. And as I saw and felt they were moving, I heard, and pretty soon, within 2 or 3 minutes, I heard a hatch close up there, and I knew that the scuttle hatch had closed probably behind the last man.
When his station in the forward dynamo room of the U.S.S. Nevada became almost untenable due to smoke, steam, and heat, Mr. Ross forced his men to leave that station and performed all the duties himself until blinded and unconscious.
I wasn't able to breathe very much because I'd pulled off my undershirt and I had wet that in a drip pan right in front of me and under one of the turbine generators, of the generators that was on power, and I wrapped it around my face. And as soon as I was sure that I had my men out, and I was the last one there, I opened that door from the communication board, which was a fiberglass thing, pulled it in and pulled it behind me. And that let me have some fresh air that was trapped in there because the door had been closed behind me. And I stayed there for about, I must have been in there for about 15 minutes. And it started getting very, very hot. And I was sweating and I was getting in danger and I was trying to get extra generators on. And finally I got a report that they had the after 2 generators on back about another 150 feet from where I was. And I said, when they said, we've got the load, or the electrician on the board up above me, he said, Mr. Ross, they've got it. Trip your turbines out. You're finished. Well, I knew that. And I got out of that booth, and I couldn't breathe enough to get over to the number 2 turbine, but I knew there was a porthole right there into my machine shop and storeroom, and I got over and I opened that port and shoved my head through and got about 4 or 5 good whiffs because they had no ventilation going in there, see? And it still had the dead air that was in there when the thing started. Boy, that good air, even though it was pretty warm, boy, I was real happy. and I got my lungs filled, and I slammed that thing short, and then I turned around and went to number 2 generator and got up and tripped it. I just had to push the trip with my left hand. You didn't have to see. We had done this in blackout, and I didn't know whether we would all smoke or whether I was blind or what it was. And so when I got through there and got that one kicked off, I went right back to my porthole to the storeroom and got another mess of good air. And then I had to go a little farther for the next one, because number 1 was on the starboard side of number 2. They were about that much room between them. So I had to go farther from that porthole to get around and get over there and get up and kill that trip. And I would run out of energy by the time this happened. And I was suffocated. Just after I tripped this thing, and this electrician's mate was a 3rd class, kind of a scampy little rascal, but he had guts. And he heard me gagging, and he heard me fall when I was suffocating, and I was saying, God help me. And within a couple of minutes, I was down and I was out. And so the chief engineer was on the phone in main engine control, and Mr. Fee was calling me on the phone. Ross, come in. Ross, come in. Fee to Ross. Ross, come in. And this young 3rd-class electrician that later came down and got me, he says, Mr. Ross, he says, I think Mr. Ross is dead. He says, all of these men are out of there. They're over here in Damage Control Central. And he says, I think he's gone. He says, my God, boy, he says, Fisher, he says, I've got to have him. I can't lose Ross. He's my mainstay. And he says, I've got to have him back here. Go see if you can get him out. And that little gutsy devil did. He opened that hatch against regulations because he wasn't supposed to break watertight integrity. And this ensign that was down there with him said, don't do that, don't do that. And the kid just come on down and closed the hatch behind him, threw off his headset before he left. He come down there and he found me down. And that boy didn't weigh 145 or 150 pounds, and I weighed 180.
Upon being rescued and resuscitated, he returned and secured the forward dynamo room and proceeded to the after dynamo room, where he was later again rendered unconscious by exhaustion.
The chief engineer needed me. I was the only expert he had left. Thompson, my chief machinist mate, was out down there from heat exhaustion because the temperature was running about 160 degrees. So I had to go. I didn't have a choice. I was alive. I was breathing. I knew what was going on. I could find my way. That's what I went back there. They put a safety line on me, and I went down there, and I had Tommy over my shoulder, and I was just about halfway up that ladder, and I went out again, and he fell, and I fell to the length of the safety line, and then I was finished the second time down there from exhaustion. So they hauled me up on that safety line and got me out of there and got some other people that were more fresh from another source, and they went down and got Thompson out. And we fought that thing all night. The attack was over at 10 o'clock, but we fought all through that night.
Upon again recovering consciousness, he returned to his station, where he remained until directed to abandon it.
It wasn't that I was brave or wasn't. It was just, if you've been trained and you're a professional leader of your men are the most important thing in the world. They're more important than I was to me. My ship, you see a Navy man that had been in the Navy as long as I have. The ship, actually I think we give our souls to the ship and she becomes a living thing to us.
Heroes will return in a moment. We now return to Heroes. This is the U.S.S. Nevada, salvaged and recommissioned after she was beached at Pearl Harbor. Donald Ross would continue to serve on the Nevada throughout World War II. When Ross received his Medal of Honor in 1942, he was not allowed to talk about the circumstances surrounding his actions or the fate of the Nevada.
The reason they didn't want to decorate it on me, on the Nevada, was because people would know that she was still alive. And the Japanese had claimed that they had sunk her, and she was through. And just like the Arizona was through, and the Oklahoma was through, and the West Virginia was through. Well, they didn't want that story out, and I could not even tell when I went before audience of high schools a week after I got to the States in 1942.
Today, Donald Ross feels his mission is to now tell the story of Pearl Harbor, for those who don't know, and for everyone else to remember.
I think if America cannot learn to remember Pearl Harbor and keep America alert so that it will never happen again, my life has been useless. My ideas about our children and the need of them to know and understand this country's patriotic needs to defend this Constitution, to be able to give them some little feeling of what I'm talking about here with you today. If I can just sow a little bit to them, my life has been worthwhile.
Hero, a person admired for courage, nobility, or exploits, especially in war. A person admired for qualities or achievements and regarded as an ideal or model. He rose to the occasion. He met the challenge. He inspired us. He is a hero.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.